Hey y'all, we're very close to the Resident Evil 4 Remake release date, but let's take a moment to appreciate the OG RE4 by making this. That's right y'all, we're gonna go get lost in the iconic RE4 maze. Real quick, if you're wondering about the scale of this build, well, just like with all my Resi builds, I'm using Eta scale. What is Eta scale? Sorry, family secret. Okay, we have a mountain of work to do, so let's just jump right into it by making the centerpiece of the maze. I'm starting out with the staircase. I cut out 3 pieces with 3 different lengths, but all of the same widths, if that makes sense. I took the longest piece and cut it up into a centimeter length segments. These are going to become the steps for the stairs. I took the second piece and started to glue on the individual steps, starting from the top and working all the way down. Each step I just guessed on how far they protruded. There's a lot of guessing when Rebuilds makes things. Why? Because measuring every single thing isn't Rebuild's style. He's just not that kind of guy! Once the steps were done, I glued the third piece on and we had something that looked decent enough, but we're not done yet. I cut out the sides by tracing out the stair structure, and once glued, the stairs were done. And yeah, they're a little obtuse, but they'll work. And yes, I mean they, because we require 3 of them. Now for the stone pillar thing. I started out with this box made out of foam board, and to make it look more pillar shape, I added these strips of foam that were cut at an angle so they would have a beveled end going up like this. Next I took one of the stairs and added a piece of foam to extend it out. Then I added a curved piece, and since I didn't want to do the math, I just pieced it in so the curved bit was at a proper length. I added a few more pieces to make it look a little nicer, and then we were ready to attach these 2 later. First, we have to lay some brick. Instead of cutting out individual bricks, I will be practicing a cool crafter trick that everybody knows about, but I'll explain it anyway. By lightly scoring the foam in one direction several times, I can create the top and bottom of the bricks. And by running a thick pencil through the lines, we can create the round shape of the brick. Then I went back in and scored lines that made the individual bricks. It's kind of hard to see, but the pencil reveals all these bricks that were just hiding in this piece of foam. Isn't that great? That scoring pencil trick makes the brick game a lot easier, but not less tedious, if you know what I mean. With that done, I attached the 2 pieces and we could move on. The bricks are nice and straight, but they still look like foam, which is a problem. So I took this crumpled up tinfoil ball and smooshed the foam with it, and it gave me that weathered brick texture I wanted. This is the first time I've tried this method and I liked it. The texture doesn't really show up now, but when we paint it, all will be revealed. Speaking of paint, let's paint. As always, before painting, I Mod Podged it to prep the foam for the paint, and while that dried, I took the piece I built off camera and base coated it with a nice light brown. I chose this color because it fit the color in the game the best. The khaki was nice and all, but it was too boring, so I went in with a light gray color and painted a few choice bricks. This will add some nice variety and help break up the base coat. I also mixed up a grayish tan and painted a few bricks in the color as well. Here's a quick comparison of the 2 colors I used on the bricks. Next I mixed up a light version of the base coat, and with a really dry brush, I dry brushed the piece to tie in all the colors. It's very subtle, but you know, it's doing something for the paint job. I was pretty happy with the colors, but they were too clean and bright for the look I wanted. So I cooked up a batch of black wash and spread that nice dirty grime all over, and it actually worked the way I wanted it to. And after some nice words from Rebuild's little sister,
"Oh, it's really realistic,"
I mixed up some green wash and just spread it into a few select places. Okay, after adding some budget railing made out of cross-stitch canvas, these pieces were done, and they came out pretty alright. But Resident Evil fans would know that something goes right here, so let's make that next. We're starting off this fountain with this circle. Now you can achieve this perfect circle by either using this plastic cap, as you can see here, or you can use a complicated device like this to make the shape. Doesn't matter which one, they'll both work, but the compass tool will give you this perfectly centered hole, which will come in handy later. The circle is nice and all, but it's not much of a base. So I cut out a strip of foam board, marked a 1/2 centimeter line on it, then convinced it into a circly shape, and glued it around the aforementioned circle. I cut out small strips and glued them on the very bottom, and with that we had a decent fountain base. For the rest of the fountain, I will be using air dry clay. If you have seen any other videos of mine, you would know that I don't really like this clay, for a host of reasons. The main one being, when it dries, it cracks and falls apart. But I've actually figured out a few ways to keep it from doing that, so it's an okay clay now for me. I took a blob of clay and smooshed it down with a roundy bit to make this disc shape. Then I did it again with less clay and created a slightly smaller disc. Then I rolled out a fatty snake of clay and gave it a twist for some reason. Then I cut out a small segment out of it. With the pieces cut out, I stabbed a toothpick in the perfectly centered hole and began to stack the pieces, making sure to put some glue down for each segment. I rolled out a tiny snake and wrapped it around to try and make this whole thing look a little better, and it looked okay, but we need to add the part that will make it a fountain. And this Lego turned upside down looks to be a perfect mold. The only problem I can foresee is that the clay will stick to the Lego like ugly on an ape, so we require something to prevent that. And I didn't have anything in my crafting arsenal, so let's raid the kitchen instead. Here's what I found in the rebuild kitchen, meaning my little sister's kitchen, but that's not the point. The point is, can we use any of this stuff? Too sticky, too oily. Maybe we can use butter. It is, after all, nature's lube. Who forked my butter? This could work, but I'm not hungry right now. I guess plastic wrap is the winner. I cut off a small piece of the plastic and wrapped it around the Lego, then smothered it with clay. I smoothed the shape out as best I could, and then I trimmed the very top to create a nice straight edge. I was pretty pleased with how it worked out, so we moved on. However, this clay can't be trusted to not crack and fall apart when dried, so before then I'm putting a layer of PVA glue over it. This is just the first step I took to keep it from cracking. And yes, I'm straight up putting tacky glue over the whole thing, but trust me. Once the glue was dry, I demolded it, and the strength of the coat of glue made this process a lot easier. See? Trust me. I then assembled the rest of the fountain pieces. This budget fountain came out much better than I thought, and all I did was use a few tools, a very small amount of sculpting skill, and some basic molds made out of crap. And it kinda gave me the confidence to actually sculpt something else. Maybe? The second and final step I took to prevent the clay from cracking is to Mod Podge the whole thing. Then I painted it with the same color scheme as before. I added a nice black wash to it to grime it up a bit, and it was done, right? Not quite, but more on this later. Next are the hedges, which are the main event of this whole build. I started out with a ready board and cut strips out that were a 1/2 centimeter wide, give or take. Then I assembled those strips into this shape, or the shape of one of the hedges. To figure out how many and what shapes to make the hedges in, I actually used the map from the game. I didn't even remember that RE4 had a map system, only because I've played RE4 so much over the years that I have everything memorized at this point. Yeah, Rebuilds has no life. All he does is play video games. With the shapes taken care of, let's play with some wood, because I'm making planters boxes. No, not from Plants vs. Zombies. The hedges are actually planted in planter boxes, if you didn't know. I'm wrapping the pre-cut foam strips with the crafting sticks, and that was enough to get the box look I wanted, and then I made all the others the same way. 8 in total. Once again, the map was super helpful for this. Next, I base coated the boxes in, of course, the brown that Ada gave us in the last RE4 video. Once the RE4 approved brown was dry, I dry brushed a nice burnt sienna over the brown, and that was about all I did for the color. I was happy with it. Okay, dirt time. These wouldn't be planter boxes without some dirt, so let's use some real stuff. I mixed the dirt with PVA glue and spread that delicious forbidden paste in the boxes, and when it was dry it looked dirty, but the good kind of dirty. But let's not get lost in the sticky icky, because some cross-stitch canvas is incoming. The actual hedges will be made out of this miracle crafting material. I cut out several pieces and super glued them together in the same shape of the planters boxes. This is nice, but commit it to memory because you'll never see it again because it's time for the greenery growth. I used a very dark green flocking and I felt that it matched the game pretty good. I got this flocking from the Hobby Lobby store, one of Rebuild's favorite places of shoppery. I kicked off the extra flock or whatever didn't stick, and once it was fully dry I glued it to the planter box and the hedges were done. And I could have shown me making all of them, but it would be just me doing the same thing over and over again with just minimal differences in shape alone. So to keep this video from being too repetitive, let's move on. Don't worry though, we'll see these beautiful hedges later. Everything that you've seen up until now is something that Rebuilds doesn't want to do again, so let's save our progress real quick. For all the junk we just built, we need a base. The build is irresponsibly big, so I'm breaking out this crappy foam that I got when I bought a new TV. And yeah, I just bought it for the foam. Just drew that TV right out, just like SpongeBob did. I cut this expensive foam down to the desired size, which was too big to be called a miniature build at this point. Since most of the things are built, I went ahead and traced out where everything goes. Before moving on, I prepped the base with a nice thick coat of Mod Podge. This will add strength and get the foam ready for paint. Speaking of paint, I base coated the base in a nice dark brown, and at this point I got hungry because it looks just like a Star Crunch Debbie snack. Okay, the dirt is back because we got to cover up the Star Crunch edges. I mixed up another delicious batch of Sticky Icky. I started applying the dirt glue mixture just by hand. It was the best way. I'm wearing gloves because Rebuilds doesn't like touching sticky dirt and getting it on his hands, because he's kind of a clean freak. Once applied, this sticky soup needs at least 24 hours to dry properly, but to make sure there's no funny business with this foam warping on me, I'm weighing it down with anything that I could find in the reach of my desk. A day later and it looks great. Let's move on to the grass. This is 2mm medium green static grass, which means we're breaking out the static grass applicator. And of course, I named mine Vulcan, for obvious reasons. I applied the sticky, then the grassy, and this grass is so small I think I could have got away with just dumping it on rather than using the applicator, but I had it, so I used it. After it dried, it looked like this, and it was done, but it's not ready for its accessories just yet. We need to flock the accessories themselves. I mixed up two different colors of fine green turf flocking and applied it sparingly in certain spots on the various structures we built earlier. This was mainly used to cover up some areas that I didn't like for one reason or another. Next, I flocked one of the two fountains, but this isn't the interesting fountain. This is the interesting fountain. Why? Because I'm going to use this. Yep, UV resin, or at least UV glue. I'll be using this as a water effect. I have never used any type of resin, so my experience is zip, and immediately it showed when I attempted to add the blue alcohol ink. For some reason I thought I could properly mix the color in the resin in the fountain itself. This was a rookie mistake. The blue color I chose was also not great. So just like a true crafter when they make a mistake, I decided to cover it up with pointless detail. These are thick vines that I made for another project a while back, and I thought they would look good coming out of the fountain. Kinda like Plant 42 from Resident Evil Remake, at least I think its name was Plant 42. I wanted to add more resin, so I properly mixed up a new batch, and this time I added a nice purple tint to it. This is the juice from the plant, I guess. Then I cured it with my gel nail polish blue light, and I thought it looked pretty good. But there were unsightly gaps, so I stuffed some flocking around the fat vines and called it good. It isn't accurate to the game, but who knows, maybe the remake will have a second-rate plant monster in it. Who knows? Haha, when I add this wizard hat, it looks like a Final Fantasy enemy now. But that's not Resident Evil. Now it's the exciting time for the afterthought accessories. For the chests in the maze, I started with garbage foam blob. Then it evolved in a garbage wooden blob. This was the ugly phase, by the way. Then I evolved it one more time into what looked like a treasure chest. I painted it in the game's color scheme, and the 3 chests were done. Why only 3, when clearly the RE4 maze had 4 chests? Well, it seems I'm living with a klepto these days. I don't know why she stole it, and I don't know where she put it, and we'll probably never find out. The last thing I built for the chests were the 3 columns that they sit on in the maze. The last thing we're going to make is the doggo cage. Now I built this cage to keep my Lisa figure from running amok in my crafting closet, but I forgot to glue the roof on, so she escaped, and now is too smart to be trapped again. So I'm going to repurpose it to be the RE4 doggo cage, and after a quick paint change to match it with the color schemes, which was brown and tan, I flocked it and added the gate, and it was done, right? Well, it wouldn't be much of a doggo cage without a doggo. So let's sculpt one. I started out with a tinfoil ball. It's always good to start with a solid mask before adding the clay, and tinfoil is perfect for this because it's moldable, if that's a word, and it's oven safe. I formed the foil into a rough doggo shape, then I brought in the clay and I started applying it in a very thin dose. This step is just to get a nice even clay surface and cover up the foil. I also brought in the sculpting tool as well to get the clay in the nooks and crannies of the doggo. Okay, with that off baking, let's sculpt the head, which to tell you the truth was the most intimidating part for me. I had no clue how to do it, but I just jumped in and started with a clay blob and a dotting tool and went for it. I formed the eyes, holes, and nose, then I cut in the doggo food hole. The knife was good for that. I stuck the head on a toothpick and started on the teeth. The teeth you're seeing Rebuilds fumbling around with were just pre-baked clay segments. I just worked at it until I got at least a few teeth in there, and it came out fine, so I was happy. Next I added the ears, which were just clay blobs that I tried my best to get even and blended into the head. The last thing I did before baking was add his little nose, which was my favorite part because I got it to look pretty good. Or, you know, okay for a person who has very little experience with sculpting. With the head baked, I attached it to the body, which was also baked minus the very tip of the neck, and with that, we had a full doggo. But it wasn't done yet. The last thing I did was add the wound, or where the tentacles come out, and I did that by adding 2 clay noodles. I blended and smoothed them in as best I could, and the doggo was done. I was quite pleased on how it turned out, even though my standards for sculpting is very low because I have no clue what I'm doing. After baking, I base coated it in black for some reason, and when you look at it dead on, it looks so deranged. It actually reminds me of the polar bear from Crash Bandicoot 2. You know, the one that laughs at you when you die? As for the main color, I started out with 50 Shades of Grey and realized I didn't like it at all. And I repainted it in 50 Shades of Brown, which I liked a lot better. Next, I painted the eyeballs in a spooky puke yellow. And if he didn't already look like a monstrosity, those eyes definitely sold it. I mixed up a red wash and added it to the doggo's mouth for a vicious monster look. But since Resident Evil 4 is a kid's game and this channel is ran by a man-child, let's call this red substance not blood but Kool-Aid. Yeah, he just drank a lot of Kool-Aid, kids. If what you just saw wasn't creepy enough, the next part will probably get my channel deleted because we're making the tentacles. No, not everything associated with tentacles have to be inappropriate. But still, this is the internet, so we'll call them spikes. Yeah, that's better. I made these spikes out of clay, then I painted them a red color, then I busted out some yellow gel nail polish and applied a small amount to said spikes. And once cured, we had our tentacles, spikes. Next, I used some UV resin to attach the spikes in the gross, fleshy part of the doggo, and since there were several spikes, I needed Rebuild's little sister to hold one of them while it cured. Once they were secured, I added some more of that puke yellow nail polish to make it look a little grosser, I guess. Once cured, the doggo was done, and it came out pretty good. Even though I don't have much experience in sculpting, I at least got it to look like a doggo. But now that I'm looking at it, I could have done more with the spikes, because they just look like mustard sticks to me right now, but oh well. With the doggo in his forever home, we have reached the point of the video where me and my strange homeschooling voice will shut up and let the assembly montage roll. We'll meet up outside for the glamour shots later. Well, we have reached the end, folks. Thank you for taking the time to watch Rebuild's fanboy over Resident Evil 4. And yeah, I just spent 30 days on building, filming, and editing a video, all to say one thing to the internet. Rebuilds loves the Resident Evil franchise and Resident Evil 4. I don't know about RE4 Remake. Hopefully it's good and respectful to the original. Rebuild will be playing it probably later this year because he don't pre-order games. Never has, never will. Well, if they ever remade Final Fantasy XIII or remastered it, then I may consider pre-ordering a game for the first time. If you like this video, remember to give it a like and consider subscribing so you can enjoy more Resi crafts and other unrelated Resi crafts. I hope you all have a wonderful day and go play Resident Evil 4. And remember, be kind and rewind, and I'll see you in the next one.